Okay, so this is a modified John Deere 100. I'm going to take a look at it. This is a 1977 model. It's got 99% of the original parts minus the motor-ish. Exhaust in the back, got the AG tires. It's just a reflector with magnets on it, so it's not permanent, but it's nice to have a reflector back there. Because this thing has no lights as originally built. That little pad on the seat there. AG tires there in the front. Got the exhaust there coming out each side. One cylinder per. And again, this is a John Deere 100. Basically, I've got it set up. Original ignition. I used a new throttle on there because it works better with this motor. And I put a choke up at the top right there. Then I've got another hole right there that I'm actually going to use for an auxiliary, but that will be later. It's a 3-speed transmission, and one of the things that's unique about this is that it has more of a stick shift than it has anything else. I'm going to wait for this motorcycle to pass. So when you sit on this, your clutch is the left and your brake is the right. Most of the time those are included now on tractors, but that's what makes these kind of special. Is you start basically, it's reverse, first, second, third. I believe I had to sit on there and do it actually to remember it, but that's the way it is, I think. And then your brake pedal over here. So I've got the tread on there where the original is rubber mat. It's much less thickness to it. That stuff kind of peeled off and just left a residue after a while. So what makes this one kind of different and special is we've got a 20 horsepower on this one. And I've seen them modified, but I haven't seen this particular modification. Now, the only real major thing that I had to do here, well, major, I say major, is this hood. I had to shape the hood around the motor because the original hood came straight across there, and I had my side flares on there like the original. Well, this one I had to cut out to shape around the motor. Not too drastically, still structurally sound hood and all, but I did have to do some modifications. See, I just have a little bit of clearance on the front for that. Little clearance there. And I've got the exhaust coming right outside the frame and dropping down below the frame. I had this up here. This was originally a shape. The hood was in pretty bad shape to start with. So this has an air screen at the top to where this thing, which really needs it, can breathe. Because that's a big 20 horsepower air-cooled motor. So instead of having this really messed up hood, this is less messed up, I guess is the right way to say it. But once the motor starts and you have that panel on there, it's sucked down. You can't get it up anyway. It's sucked down so hard, but I usually take it off just to run the motor. It's hot out. Didn't have to make any modification here, but I had to make a modification on the side here where there's normally a rubber stock joint. It's just basically an engine mount that's rubberized so it can move around a little bit, and I had to eliminate that part because it was in the way, and instead what I did was I bolted the engine to this piece, which is on the frame, and then put a rubber bushing between them. So that mount is different, although essentially it does the same thing. I have nothing up in the front of here where before this is all exhaust for the original 8 horsepower motor. The original one also has a steel grate or support coming across the top of here. Looks similar to the top of this motor, but it also has a gas tank sitting on top of it, which you can see in the photos and stuff of the original JD100. But once I got this motor in here, there wasn't really room for much else, so I had to do some modifications just to really get the battery in nicely, safely. And then that left me with nowhere to go with the gas tank, so that's why the gas tank ended up on the back. Now that is an original John Deere 100 gas tank, but that's not where it's supposed to be mounted, and that's not the mount. I had to make that work, and it works very well, by the way. So, really happy with that. Let's see. Don't really have any other major modifications that I had to make this thing. But one thing I did was I had a 20 horsepower on this thing, and what was happening was I was driving it, checking it out, and I noticed I had, well, obviously too much horsepower. But what I decided to do was take advantage of the little bit of that horsepower, and I stepped up the gearing in the rear end by a real simple little move here. Sounds simple anyway. I had to take out the rear end and change this main drive pulley back here above, just inside of the right rear wheel. And basically the input was a 4-inch pulley coming from the motor up there in the front, which was probably 3.5 or 4 inches itself. So it's kind of a 1-to-1. So I kept the 4-inch in the front and I put a 2 in the back to double the speed here. And it's not so fast that you get a wobble or that you need to weld the front end so it doesn't move anymore, but it'll go twice as fast as before, which might be 10 miles an hour at the fastest, which is fine. It's not overbearing, but it does take advantage of a little bit of the horsepower it had. It's different than the original. Still has the power to just idle up this hill here. Obviously more power to do that, but before it would do that with the 8 horsepower too, but it's definitely got more horsepower in it to do that. One of the reasons I changed the rear pulley also, not only was I trying to take advantage of some of the horsepower, I was trying to get rid of some of the horsepower as well, because when I first hooked this thing up and I put it in 3rd gear and I dumped the clutch, I popped the wheelie. So I had way too much power going into rear wheels and the rear end, and I thought I was going to tear my rear end apart. So by putting the 2-inch pulley in there and make it a little bit faster, it makes that belt more of the weak spot in the drive system instead of the rear end being the weak spot. That 2-inch pulley will slip a little before I get into any major parts where I tear out the gears. So I'm going to get this ready, move the camera, and I'm going to fire it up.